The sun was gently rising, casting its warm glow over the city as Aurora Quinn finished tidying up aisle 6 in the bustling supermarket where she worked. Her long shift stocking shelves were quietly satisfying, but the relentless hours often left her longing for something more. Today, that more was happening. Having saved for months, Aurora had booked a day at the prestigious Silver Vine Winery, a place she'd often passed by, wistfully imagining the day she would finally indulge in its luxury. Her rare treat was meant to mark a small celebration of triumph over a series of life's quieter battles, both acknowledged and unacknowledged. Arriving at the winery, Aurora was captivated by the manicured gardens and the air that carried notes of sweet jasmine and aged oak. She felt a mix of excitement and nerves. Her simple dress and well-loved canvas tote bag starkly contrasted with the designer outfits of other patrons who floated gracefully from marble pathway to tasting rooms. Ignoring a flicker of self-consciousness, Aurora pressed on, heart pounding with anticipation. Inside, the scent of polished wood and fermenting grapes enveloped her senses as she hesitantly approached the Sommelier station. But her dream moment crumbled when the Sommelier, with a condescending smirk, sneered about her cheap-looking dress and remarked that she seemed out of place. His words were sharp, stinging in the still air and drawing the eyes of other guests who paused to witness the scene. Invisible pins of embarrassment pricked Aurora as her cheeks flushed with shame. She felt the joy of her anticipated experience dissipate, leaving her feeling small, judged, and silently pleading for the earth to swallow her whole. Aurora stood frozen for a moment, the shock of the sommelier's words reverberating in her mind. Around her, the world continued to move. A man chuckled softly under his breath, a couple exchanged knowing glances, and a group of elegantly dressed women whispered amongst themselves, their eyes flicking towards her and then back to their half-filled glasses of wine. A middle-aged woman with kind eyes caught Aurora's gaze for a brief moment and offered a small, empathetic smile, but the gesture was drowned in overwhelming humiliation. Feeling her heart sink, Aurora managed to stammer a quiet apology, her voice barely audible amidst the tinkling laughter and soft murmur of conversation that had resumed in the tasting room. With her head bowed low and cheeks aflame, she turned away, the hem of her simple dress brushing against the polished wooden floors with every step. She could feel her pulse thrumming in her ears, a deafening reminder of her mortifying exit. Outside, the sunlight felt harsher now, unwelcome against her heated skin. She found a stone bench tucked in the shade of an overgrown lavender bush and sank onto it, the weight of the morning heavy on her shoulders. Here, away from prying eyes and whispering voices, she let herself breathe. Aurora reached into her canvas tote and pulled out a notebook, its pages worn and slightly yellowed. She opened it randomly, though she didn't read the words. Those were for other times, happier times when dreams felt attainable. Instead, today's entries would remain a collection of smudged thoughts and unspoken disappointments. She closed the notebook and placed it back into her bag, her hands trembling slightly. Gazing out towards the vine-draped fields, she allowed herself to reflect on how she had come to this moment. Each thought felt like a slow unraveling thread, weaving back into her recent past. Images and sounds played vividly in her mind, the rhythmic beep of the supermarket's checkout register, the incessant flicker of the fluorescents overhead, afternoons skipping meals to save a few extra dollars for this one splurge. There had been time spent peering into her cramped apartment mirror, practicing quiet smiles and poise for this anticipated day, this reward she carved out for herself among the daily grind. Aurora thought back to her initial decision to visit Silver Vine Winery. It wasn't just an idle dream or a whimsical notion. There had been genuine purpose tethering her desire, a gentle suggestion from her doctor, heavy with sincerity, that the antioxidants in wine might aid with her persistent fatigue. Aurora had previously dismissed the idea, deeming it too indulgent, too extravagant for someone like her who spent more time budgeting groceries than budgeting luxuries. Yet, as months ambled on, the winery remained a beacon, a shimmering oasis of possibility. It was the small things she'd set aside to reach this day, a skipped lunch here, making do with old instead of buying new there, bypassing coffees and tiny treats in favor of scribbled savings each week. Her resolve had been patient, unyielding, the same grit she summoned daily for her colleagues, friends, and even passing strangers, yet rarely allowed for herself. Today was meant as a small beacon in a world that often overlooked the quiet, untouted victories won with persistence rather than pomp. But now, standing at the precipice of her collapsed plans, she felt the weight of that lost dream sinking into her bones. The sommelier's biting remark echoed in her mind, a reminder that the chasm between her life and the world of luxury remained as vast as ever. A flood of memories enveloped her, adding layers to the churning disappointment. She pictured herself on the grocery run Fridays, pausing at the wine section to scan for discounted French reds, mulling over vintage cards to explore later, for now marked as future treats. The simple contentment in cooking dinner alone after work, transforming the chore into charm with a splash of Merlot, felt fragile by comparison. It was during those quiet moments at home when she allowed herself to dream of one full day without boundaries, where she wouldn't need to conserve or compromise. As she sat there processing her dashed hopes, a part of her reflected on her strength. How she'd persevered in the face of setbacks, continuing to carve out moments of joy against a world painted in shades of monotony. It brought reassurance, a gentle warmth that wrapped around her like an old, familiar sweater, a recognition of the quiet reserves of fortitude she knew she possessed, even when the world insisted on underestimating her. Recognition of blessings mingled with her bitterness, their alchemy creating unexpected clarity. This wasn't merely an isolated event but the capstone of similar experiences, a systemic message stating the clear division between us and them, between those who belonged and those deemed as others. As the west wind nonchalantly ruffled through the lavender bush beside her, Aurora considered that maybe, just maybe, these subtle banishments from realms of indulgence were not as defining as she had once believed. That perhaps, dreams might still be built without satisfying someone else's expectations on belonging. A gentle resolve bubbled within her, a quiet stubbornness that refused to collapse under the weight of another's judgment. There, amidst the sour remnants of her abandoned vineyard vision, she took a deep breath and began reassembling, not her interrupted dream, but herself. Aurora sat for a few more moments, her dusk-colored eyes tracing the delicate outlines of vineyard rows stretching ahead, their verdant embrace batting openly back against the heavens. The minutes passed quietly, the weight in her chest steadying with each unrushed inhale and deliberate exhale. Eventually, acceptance followed understanding. She wasn't going to let unjust words spoil her determination forever. She rose from the bench, the horizon calling her attention promisingly forward. Aurora Quinn walked away from Silver Vine Winery, fortified by a burgeoning realization that she might sometimes be an outsider to luxury's world, but she was never truly alone. In her mind, she repeated a silent mantra cultivated from years of hard work and unyielding determination, one that desired to be declared one final time. It was a firm reaffirmation of self and that no fleeting cruelty, no thrown words could ever diminish the worth she carried within. After sitting on the bench and reflecting on her experience, Aurora composed herself and rose to her feet, brushing off the remnants of morning dew that had settled on her dress. The day's harsh beginning lingered around the edges of her thoughts, but she squared her shoulders, determined to reclaim some sense of normalcy. As she wandered off the main path, her mind still replaying the events of that humiliating encounter, something caught her attention. To her left, a side entrance led to the winery's back area. Normally inconspicuous, today it presented a different scene. Aurora noticed two staff members, a young woman carrying a clipboard and an older man with his sleeves rolled up, standing just outside the doorway, speaking in hushed tones. The urgency in their voices pulled her closer. "I'm telling you, those pipes can't wait," the young woman insisted, her forehead creased with concern. "Management says it's not in the budget this month," the man replied, his voice carrying a tone of resignation. "And the wiring in the cellar is just as bad. But until something happens, they're not likely to shell out for repairs." The woman sighed. "I know it isn't safe. Visitors have to rely on these exits, especially if anything were to happen." As she listened, Aurora's attention was drawn to a crude lock binding the door shut from the inside, a blatant fire exit violation. Her background in retail management, albeit modest, instilled awareness about safety codes, and this breach was severe. An emergency exit was supposed to be accessible at all times. Sensing the gravity of the situation, a sense of responsibility filtered through Aurora. Perhaps it was the morning's adversity or maybe just a deep-seated sense of justice, but she knew she couldn't leave without taking action. Slowly, she felt a determination unfurl from within, a resolve born not from pride but from a duty to prevent possible harm to others. She stepped back, ensuring her presence remained unnoticed. Quietly, she retrieved her phone and angled it towards the door, snapping a series of photos of the chained exit and the compromising conditions. She included several wide shots capturing staff discussing openly under a "No Visitors" sign, highlighting the incongruence between public image and behind-the-scenes reality. With the evidence gathered, Aurora found a secluded spot on the other side of the lot, where she composed a detailed message. She addressed it to the local Consumer Safety Authority, detailing the safety hazards she'd witnessed. Her fingers moved quickly over the screen as she described the padlocked fire exit, invalidated electrical routings, and negligence attributed to overlooking vital safety procedures in favor of cost-cutting. Before sending it, Aurora recalled the journalist, Renata E., who she frequently read in the regional papers. Ye's stories often exposed systemic issues within the community, and her reputation for getting results was impressive. Aurora forwarded the email to Renata too, providing the context necessary to encapsulate the urgency of the matter. With a thumb hovering above the send button, doubt momentarily crept in. Should she, a simple retail worker, really be the person to raise this alarm? But then she remembered the looks on the faces of the staff, varied reflections of worry, annoyance, and weary resolve, and it fortified her decision. She pressed send, feeling an emancipating release wash over her. A cloud shifted its formation overhead, altering the shadows cast by the sunshine-drenched landscape. She lingered for a moment, her gaze tracing the paths of elegant guests wandering among the vines. Unlike them, she garnered no pleasure from these promises of luxury and leisure, but she felt herself in possession of something far rarer, a moral resolve buoyed by the faint prospect of change. It was with bolstered resolve that Aurora walked toward her battered sedan. Her heart and mind echoed with the morning's misgivings and her cautious optimism about the actions pursued. She knew she had done what felt right. As the vehicle's engine rumbled to life, she caught a final glimpse of the sprawling greenery, underlined by the burgeoning hope that some good might arise from her day's encounter. Driving back toward the familiar envelopments of her neighborhood, she replayed snippets of her newfound resolve but tempered it with reality. Atlantic landscapes merged into urban hues, refocusing her thoughts on the unfolding possibilities. Could a simple gesture, framed by adversity, truly ripple beyond her immediate sphere? Aurora reached home just as the sun tucked itself below the horizon, tendrils of twilight shading the world. The cozy confines of her modest apartment welcomed her like an old friend, deliberately contrasting the opulent winery she'd left behind. Before slipping into her routine evening tasks, Aurora emptied her mind of expectation and revisited her emails, actions now settled into the wings of her cumulative story. Anxiety tugged briefly at her consciousness. What would become of her report? Would it catalyze any change? Only time would tell. Yet in belonging with unforgotten resolve, she once again marveled at her shadow's strength. After brewing a calming cup of chamomile tea, Aurora settled by the window for a moment of quiet reflection, realizing that today was not about changing the institutionalized faces of luxury, but it was about standing up for more profound truths, human truths undisguised by pretense. Perhaps there was more impact she could have made by remaining silent, a study in survival culminating in a benign encounter with momentary discomfort, but instead she had chosen to speak. Fueling the breaking wave of courage and justice, woven keenly from the threads of her own life's unassuming narrative, Aurora had taken steps she hoped would matter. The room was softly illuminated by the gentle glow of street lamps. Now, as she embraced the soothing familiarity of home with her own calming assurances, Aurora's heart beat steadily in time with wisdom's whispered invitation for tomorrow. A promise renewed in silence, she knew this wasn't just the end of one troubled journey but perhaps, she pondered, the unassuming beginning of what comes after. The morning after Aurora filed her report, the city hummed with its usual bustle. Traffic and pedestrians engaged in their daily dance, yet an undercurrent of change seemed to vibrate through the air, a prelude to an unfolding story. It began quietly. Aurora awoke to the familiar sound of her phone alert vibrating against the bedside table. Blinking against the early light, she reached for it, her heart skipping a beat at the sight of numerous notifications. Tentatively, she swiped through them, messages of support from friends, alerts of social media tags, and emails from strangers whose words of encouragement buoyed her still tender spirit. One message, in particular, stood out, a personal note from Renata E. herself. "Aurora," it began, "your bravery speaks volumes. You've pointed out something that cannot be ignored, and I am running with this story. This could be pivotal for our community. Thank you for taking a stand." Within hours, the local news was ablaze with stories about the winery's safety violations and the sommelier's humiliating behavior. Renata's article painted a vivid picture of Aurora's experience, coupling it with shocking details of the winery's overlooked safety hazards. The public reaction was swift and fierce. Social media platforms were alight with indignation and support. #StandWithAurora became a trending hashtag, with people sharing personal stories of similar humiliations and dismissive encounters at upscale venues. A groundswell of unity and demand for accountability emerged, championing not just Aurora's narrative, but the systematic mistreatments suffered by many. The winery, blindsided by the sudden backlash, hastily issued a statement in an attempt to salvage its reputation. Terming Aurora's encounter as an isolated incident, they announced an internal review and promised a superficial investigation into staff conduct and safety procedures. But the damage was done, and the words rang hollow to a public increasingly savvy about such generic responses. Real action came from the Consumer Safety Authority, who, taking Aurora's report seriously, launched an official investigation. Inspectors descended on the winery, uncovering deeper issues than previously anticipated. The locked fire exits, exposed wiring, and poor maintenance weren't just cosmetic oversights but were compounded by structural neglect, each violation more alarming than the last. The fallout was immediate. Authorities levied significant fines against Silver Vine Winery, forcing them to temporarily shut down their tasting room and revisit their neglected safety standards. The announcement became a clarion call for other businesses to address deferred neglect and hazardous practices. Around the community, whispers of questionable practices elsewhere began to surface, prompting a wave of self-regulation and preventative changes among local businesses. The Sommelier, the author of Aurora's public shaming, faced suspension pending further review, a perfunctory measure that spoke more to public relations tactics than true repentance. Yet his public embarrassment was palpable. Industry whispers suggested his career might face a steep uphill battle to recover. Back in her community, Aurora found herself enveloped by unexpected yet heartening support. Neighbors stopped her in the grocery store, offering words of thanks and appreciation. Fellow retail workers she'd known for years spoke out about their own experiences, emboldened by Aurora's quiet courage to confront institutions that belittled them. Aurora received letters, not just from strangers moved by her story, but from people she had never met, who had suffered silently until now. Their gratitude was humbling, affirming her actions and restoring her belief in her impact beyond her immediate sphere. With each message, it became clear she had sparked something larger, a movement demanding respect and inclusion. Meetings were organized by local advocacy groups, inviting Aurora to speak about her experience and the broader implications of inequitable treatment suffered by workers in invisible positions. Her story became a linchpin in conversations about customer rights, dignity, and the ethical obligations of frontrunners in hospitality industries. The world seemed alight with change, and in her heart, Aurora felt something shift, a reclaiming of dignity she hadn't realized she was forfeiting with each courteous smile offered in lieu of deserved recognition. She accepted invitations graciously, participating earnestly in open dialogues that fostered change. But she remained grounded, returning to her simple life between engagements, a reality interrupted only by the support network that included newfound friends and advocates inspired by her stand. Perhaps it was the culmination of events, or maybe just the self-affirmation cementing within her spirit, but Aurora felt lighter in these weeks following her action. Behind every word, every gesture, lay a simple truth finally unshackled from its weary shadow. She stood for herself and had become a voice for others. In the wake of this revelation, Aurora continued acknowledging the larger landscape of kindness and consequence born from moments she hadn't anticipated influencing this profoundly. Her world had grown without shrinking familiar bonds, a testament to the inexplicable balance of courage and community. Even as Silver Vine Winery attempted further damage control, announcing plans for remodeling, safety updates, and staff retraining, the narrative had surpassed any single institution. The world was listening, eager to honor the unspoken struggle manifest in so many. Aurora remained unassuming yet awakened by the quiet strength now carried with her uniquely owned dignity. It was a pride not over external validations, but over the enduring impact her voice had orchestrated, a music crescendoing toward fairness, unity, and uncompromised recognition. As winter approached, Aurora's journey felt like a symbolic harvest, of seeds sown diligently over years, whose fruits revealed themselves in actions taken beyond the ordinary. Today, and for many tomorrows, Aurora walked steadfastly with an open heart, quietly redeemed by an audacious act of claiming space in a world determined to dim her shine. And with each day, as the landscape repaired itself from the disruption, she too embraced renewal, her courage a guiding light that resonated far beyond Silver Vine's shadowed trellises, blossoming in unforeseen, beautiful ways. Some weeks had passed since the tumultuous uproar that Aurora had inadvertently set in motion. Each day brought new elements of routine back into her life, yet she carried herself with a subtly changed bearing. Despite still wearing the same practical yarns and shoes that spoke to her humility, she now walked with an indefinable buoyancy, a confidence fueled by the ripples of change she'd inspired. Returning to the supermarket where she worked wasn't just a simple re-entry into her previous life but a recognition of her own intrinsic worth. The same shelves, the same daily rhythm, yet with a deeper self-assurance of the significance behind every small act, every mundane interaction, which now gleamed with unsung potential. Customers and co-workers alike approached her differently. There was an unspoken understanding, a kind of reverence for who she had become to them, something like a hometown hero. People were kinder, more appreciative. Words of support and smiles that once belonged only in passing now lingered warmly under the fluorescent lights, infusing her work environment with newfound camaraderie. In her email inbox, Aurora discovered a formal letter from the local Consumer Safety Authority thanking her for her vigilance and instrumental role in prompting a broader safety overhaul across various locations. With the letter came an invitation to join a discussion panel at an upcoming community forum addressing consumer rights and business ethics. The depth of recognition felt surreal yet gratifying. Deciding to participate, she began preparing her story once more, not as the recounting of a singular event, but as a testament to everyday courage and collective advocacy. Her friends encouraged her, softly nudging the spotlight her way as she modestly laughed it off, drawing strength from their unyielding support. The winery's management extended yet another olive branch, this time more heartfelt and less contrived. A letter of apology addressed directly to her detailed the changes they were implementing, not just as public relations maneuvers but geared towards genuine transformation. That included new policies to better train staff in customer service and updated safety protocols to prioritize visitor welfare. Reading it, Aurora felt a calm acceptance swell within her. The apology was appreciated, yet she found contentment more in their actions than in the words themselves. Walking past the Silver Vine Winery on a brisk afternoon, the place looked physically unchanged. But colorful banners now proclaimed "Grand Reopening Soon," beneath a pledge of renewed commitment to safety and inclusivity. The transformation was notable not by sight but by sentiment. Aurora didn't linger there as she might have once, hoping for the acknowledgement she since realized was found in embracing her own truth without seeking external validation. The moment was one of quiet closure, a chance to step forward, unburdened by the weight of what once was. In her heart, Aurora held the collective narratives of those she had unwittingly empowered. Their messages and stories, shared in quiet, heartfelt expressions across her inbox and correspondent meetups, painted a tapestry rich with diversity yet unified in pursuit of dignity. It was these voices she would carry into the upcoming forum, not to tell of her actions alone but as a part of a grander statement on shared humanity. On one particular evening, as she sat in the comfort of her modest apartment sipping tea and watching the late autumn drizzle paint streaks on her window, she reflected on how far she had come. The memory of that initial, harrowing encounter at the winery was now softened into perspective, reshaping itself into a touchstone of resiliency. Aurora understood now that her courage was both unique and universal, a quiet force shared across boundaries, across aisles of supermarkets, waiting lines, and beneath the modest roofs under which people lived and thrived. This realization fortified her, lending her a cool but firm resolve as she drafted her short speech for the community forum. She let her thoughts flow, brimming with authenticity and tempered confidence. There was no room for self-doubt, only an open channel honed to reflect collective strength. And as she climbed onto the modest stage of the local civic center, Aurora found herself at a podium under gentle lights. Audience members, including former strangers turned supporters, looked up at her with expectant faces. She paused, allowing a deep breath to center her. A smile lifted her features, reflecting the resolve and kindness that had become her new lingua franca. "Hello, everyone." The words came easily, as if pulled from the currents of the lasting bonds sown from acts of courage and the unwavering determination every ordinary person can summon in the name of justice. Aurora spoke not as a figurehead but as a harbinger of a movement larger than herself, affirming an inclusive vision where compassion and dignity determined the sheen of their shared society. Each word shared, each point addressed, echoed with reminders of the potential for significant change laying within the everyday choices and voices risen in unison. As she concluded, heartfelt applause erupted, its resonance tender and strong, a celebration not only of the movements Aurora had championed but for the enduring spirit of all aspiring dreamers determined to speak from the heart, demanding to be heard. In the aftermath of the forum, Aurora once more felt grounded in her world, where days followed nights seamlessly, painted together by earnest companionship and laughter. She continued her life among familiar aisles, yet far richer in spirit, marked by subtle changes and newfound understanding. Aurora Quinn had not sought the spotlight but found herself within its embrace, became a beacon for others, a testament to the transformative power of small yet unwavering acts of defiance against systemic wrongs. Small in deeds yet substantial in impact, Aurora's courage wasn't merely enough. It was momentous, for the world she envisioned, enriched with every pronouncement of her undeniable strength, had become just a little bit fairer.